Salam alaikum, uh, and good afternoon for those who are in Egypt or lands further east. My name is John Duke Anthony. I'm the founding president and chief executive officer of the National Council on U.S. Arab Relations. We're based in Washington, but we have a national, state, and local grassroots network since our founding in 1983. We have one mission, and that is education, and to strengthen and expand and improve upon the American relationship with the United States, friends, allies, and strategic partners. Egypt, which is the focus of today's presentation, is all three of those and more. It is regarded by many in the international travel, leisure, and tourism industries as the jewel of the world's touristic destinations. And little wonder why. I doubt that there is a school child anywhere on the planet who at some point has not been asked to make a drawing of the Sphinx or the pyramids or be aware of the River Nile and Egypt's central place in the history of the ages. Let me just tick off a few of the hotspots and hotspots of Egypt's touristic destination. And as I list them very quickly, ask yourself, what other country, if any other country, has as many profoundly interesting, prominent monuments and museums and sites of historical and cultural interest and significance? On the urban side, we're talking about Cairo and Alexandria. In terms of the geography, we're speaking of the famed beaches of the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. We're speaking of the Suez Canal, which, like an umbilical cord, links the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean and lands farther east and farther west, which is vital to the global economy for trade, investment, and technology cooperation, commerce, and business in general. We have, in addition, the age-old University of Al-Azhar, centuries old, which has been the focal point, the leading institution of higher education, training Islamic leaders in moderate Islam, and not just Egyptians, but Islamic scholars worldwide. We're speaking as well of Upper Egypt, having to do with Luxor and Aswan and the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens. And we're speaking of Hurghada and Sharm el Sheikh in the Red Sea and South Sinai regions. We're talking about the headquarters of the League of Arab States, the world's oldest regional organization devoted to addressing challenges and issues peacefully, legally, and diplomatically. It's also the home of American University in Cairo, which is now way past its 75th anniversary and is the largest American institution of higher learning anywhere outside of the United States. Egypt's museums outnumber and are more prominent and diverse than those of arguably any other Arab, Middle Eastern, or Islamic country. It has the Coptic Museum, it has the museum in Cairo, it has the Museum of Modern Egyptian Art, it has the Greco-Roman Museum, and after the COVID-19 passes, inshallah, will be something quite magnificent, a brand new, grand national museum at the pyramids of Giza, just outside of Cairo. So we have these aspects of Egypt, which is a country at peace with its neighbors, with its own challenges of modernization and development. And like all countries whose economies depend in one way or another on tourism, of course, these challenges beset by COVID-19 have been just that, a challenge for each and every country, my own, the United States, and every other touristic country in the world. tourism accounts for, some figures say, as much as 15% of Egypt's economy. And hundreds of thousands of people are employed in this job generating sector of any country's economy. Some 9,000 licensed touristic guides exist in Egypt. That number is probably greater than all of the other 21 Arab countries' tourist license certificate guides combined. So Egypt is important, always has been. It's the oldest of the Middle Eastern countries familiar with and experienced with tourism since the French campaign at the end of the 18th century, which brought to Egypt hordes of scholars eager to unearth and uncover many of the country's monuments and hallmarks to learning and knowledge and information and insight that is relevant to the lives of all past and present, and inshallah, Fima Stakbal, the future as well. We have two specialists today. One, the ambassador of Egypt to the United States, His Excellency Motaz Zahran, and Her Excellency, the Vice Minister for Tourism and Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, Her Excellency Mrs. Ghada Shalaby. The ambassador has impressive credentials. 3 times he has been in the cabinet of the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Former ambassador to Canada. His specialty, especially as an advisor to the United Nations Secretary General, is in the field of disarmament. And he's played a key role in terms of the Middle East peace processes, with the Camp David Accords of 1979 still holding to this day under the presidency of US President Jimmy Carter and Egypt's President Anwar Sadat, and Israel's then Prime Minister Menachem Begin. His involvement with the United States was preceded by a previous tour here for 4 years, where he was Egypt's political counselor at the embassy and its director for congressional affairs. So few people can come with more credentials than His Excellency Ambassador Zahran. This is the second time that we've been fortunate to have him on one of the National Council's educational programs. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador.
Well, thank you, Dr. Anthony, for your kind introduction and precise description and empirical observations of some of Egypt's diverse heritage. Allow me at the outset to extend my appreciation to the National Council on U.S.-Arab Relations for providing the opportunity to step away momentarily from global and regional policies and their associated politics that consume most of our time. And you've rightly mentioned that I've served in Washington before, and it is indeed a pleasure to serve once again in the capacity of an ambassador. Now, I would like to also to extend my gratitude, of course, to our distinguished speaker, Ms. Ghada Shalaby, our Vice Minister for Tourism Affairs in Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, for accepting the invitation to address the National Council on U.S.-Arab Relations. And I eagerly look forward to listening to the presentation and to the following comments. Undoubtedly, most people find themselves at predicaments of choice when they explore different vacation options. Today's webinar is entitled Why Egypt Should Be Your Next Destination. And this is why one should expect, after listening to our distinguished speaker and the presentation, to have a much more easier task when you make your choice regarding your next holiday. Maybe the splendor and the grandeur of the pyramids, while they impressively stand as a reminder of the ancient architectural sophistication, have beaconed the curiousness towards Egypt for centuries. And travelers have always been keen on visiting Egypt in search of its iconic wonders and in an attempt to uncover the magnificence of the everlasting, majestic pharaonic civilization. However, despite the innumerable mysteries of ancient Egypt, its colossal temples, its vast hoard of artifacts and treasures, it should be taken into account that Egypt's destiny, by virtue of its history and geography, has been gifted by a multi-dimensional course of civilizational evolution that has shaped and influenced the whole world and its region, of course, over millennia. Thus, and upon visiting Egypt, you will not only explore the splendor of the pharaonic civilization, you will have the chance to explore Jewish, Coptic, Islamic heritages, as well as the unique features of modern Egypt in a unique blend of Western and Eastern cultures ever since Khedive Ismail's ambitious endeavor to transform Cairo and Alexandria into cities resembling the luxurious cities in Europe. These huge transformations are being pursued in today's Egypt as well, with undergoing plans that have been implemented to build a fascinating new smart capital, along with 20 new cities in tandem across the land of Egypt. So let me add here that by visiting Egypt, you will have the opportunity to hit several birds with the same one stone. Besides its wealthy and diversified history that I just touched upon, you have picturesque landscapes in the Western Desert, in the Nubian South, and in Sinai. You have as well beaches and high-end resorts on the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. The good news is that the swimming season never ends in Egypt, thanks to its warm climate, which gives you a unique opportunity to lounge and soak up the sun and maybe infuse adventure into your beach retreat by snorkeling or diving to explore the magnificent, pristine waters uh, with coral reefs and sea snails and rare marine creatures. Now, I don't want to hold you up too long. I know that the audience is eager to listen to Her Excellency's presentation, during which she will tackle some important issues, namely the incentives to boost tourism, the tourism sector, pre and during and post-pandemic. The last grandiose Pharaoh's Parade, the new museums opening amongst them is the Grand Egyptian Museum, the GEM, the largest worldwide, and the date of its inaugurational ceremony should be announced soon, the digital transformation in the tourism sector, and many other vital topics. So I will probably stop here and will listen myself, as I had not, and this is a shame, had the chance so far of cruising up the mighty waters of the River Nile between Luxor and Aswan. So maybe on my next vacation, I will be on that cruise. So thank you again, Dr. Anthony, and thank you for the National Council, and looking forward to a fascinating presentation.
Mr. Ambassador, it was a superb introduction to featured specialist, Her Excellency Mrs. Ghada Shalaby, the Vice Minister for Tourism at Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. Her Excellency brings to her task, believe it or not, more than 30 years, 3 decades of nonstop emphasis, specialization, firsthand empirical experience in virtually every aspect of the tourism industry. And when I say virtually every aspect, we're talking about the transportation aspect, the accommodation aspect, the certification of specialists, the 9,000 licensed guides in Egypt. And she comes to a ministry in her task, not at a ministry that was born yesterday. Indeed, any research will reveal that Egypt has had tourism regulations by the government since the mid-19th century, since the late 1840s, straightforward from then till the present. No other Arab country, Middle Eastern country, or Islamic country has had that extensive in-depth and intensive exposure, knowledge, experience having to do with welcoming foreigners as residents or as tourists or passers-by to marvel at the country's monuments and sites of cultural and historical significance. Please join me in welcoming Her Excellency, Mrs. Ghada Shalaby.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And it's really my pleasure to speak to you today from Egypt, Dun, and the mother of everywhere, of the world. With this magnificent pyramids of Giza as my backdrop, to share the great story with you. It's the story of resilience and response during the pandemic. By the Egyptian Museum Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities to achieve a safe and successful restart to tourism in Egypt. Thank you very much, Dr. Anthony, for the introduction, introducing Egypt, introducing the ministry, and also the heritage and history of my country. I think no one can say enough about how this country is really magnificent in its history. Over the past 18 months, the world was intensely shocked by the pandemic. And this global shock required a disciplined and concentrated response. From the start of the pandemic, the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities placed strict and effective procedures and precautionary measures of sanitization and disinfection in hotels and touristic establishments in preparation to welcome guests all over the world. Egypt, as one of the most and one of the most popular and oldest touristic destinations in the world, full of fascinating history, can be visited anytime, as His Excellency Mr. Motaz Zahran has mentioned. We have 365 days of sun, of beauty, and swimming in the beaches. Also, the prime geographic location and diverse options of touristic experiences. With sustainable development as the main drive, the support and collaboration of international and regional collaboration, Egypt will remain fully committed to placing people and their well-being first, as well as supporting the tourism sector on its road to recovery. Allow me to start by talking about today's presentation, and I wish that it would satisfy your eagerness and ambition to visit Egypt as soon as this pandemic is over, or as soon as your schedule can allow. Okay. So why Egypt should be your next destination? At the Ministry of Tourism, we have a vision that we're working based on the vision to promote Egypt as a unique and major sustainable tourism destination by exploring its heritage, culture, natural resources, all while maintaining them for future generations. Experience Egypt. Now we'll go back to year 5 in every school. The geography lesson says that Egypt has a prime location in the middle of the world, close to 3 continents, Europe, Africa, and Asia, with about 3 hours and a half flights from Europe, 7 hours from Asia, and about 13 hours from the States, but connecting through Europe makes it quite easy. Sun and sea destination with Red Sea, Mediterranean, and the Nile. The various vacations enjoying the sea, sun, and sand is affordable, is reachable, and is quite popular as a touristic attraction. Also, favorable climate makes Egypt as a wonderful destination throughout the year. Various activities and experiences could be found in Egypt, ranging from culture to rural tourism, to beach activities, to souk shopping, to marine and beach holidays, also underwater activities, and sun and sea vacations. Our strategy is going according to the SDGs in 6 dimensions. Institutional and legislation reform, whereby, as you've mentioned, that the Ministry of Tourism was established as early as 1864, year 1864. Then in 1966, a unified ministry between the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of Antiquities took place. Then, back in 2019, another reform between both ministries was made under His Excellency Dr. Khalid Al-Anani, the Minister of Tourism and Antiquities, whereby it was required that both ministries would join forces under one management for a clear reason. As we've mentioned before, we were expecting lots of big events happening, the opening of the gym, the opening of the Museum of National Civilization, the Mummies Parade, many unified activities within the Antiquities that will directly impact tourism, made this decision quite wise to unite both ministries together. Why tourism is quite important for Egypt? Our economic objectives showed that before the pandemic, Egypt was just repicking up from number of falls that hit tourism directly. In 2011 and 2015, other crises happened. However, in 2019, we've reached about 13 million tourists arriving to Egypt, which was the highest took place in March, whereby everything was stopped. Aviation put a stand towards flights and dropping from almost 1 million travelers arriving to Egypt to 0 in April. This graph shows the number of tourist arrivals throughout the years, and showing the highest was in 2019. And then when we started resuming tourism in 2020, we've reached almost 3.7 million travelers. However, since tourism is quite important for us, we understood that people made lots of investments in their trip. So we wanted to give them the facility to finish their trip to Egypt and not to stop or evacuate them immediately. We took into account that they wanted to come and enjoy. We always say that a trip to Egypt is a lifetime experience, that many people dream of it, And we wanted to respect this desire. However, keeping and ensuring that travelers are spending their vacation while the pandemic was hitting the world in a safe environment was a main objective for us to ensure their health and safety as we were closing down travel globally as well. Next. People first. Sanitization, starting from sanitization, going to reduction of the presence of the workers, keeping their trainings. Also, another important element that we wanted to keep is during every crisis that happened hitting tourism, the first to be affected were the staff. And those were in our minds. We didn't want to lose our qualified staff who are the backbone of this industry. So we ensured that they would keep their jobs. Any government decisions that were taken was putting the people first, putting staff first, and we all measures were put to ensure that their job security was kept, however, also without jeopardizing the best interest of the investors as well. There were measures put in place during the pandemic where the government gave support, reduction of prices for aviation fuel were done, guarantee of the Central Bank of Egypt to ensure the salaries for staff was done. Tourism establishments taking loans with a favorable interest rates. Aviation incentives was also done. Landing and housing fees for flights were also taken as a decision by the government, and various discounts for the ground handling was also taken by the cabinet. All of these measures were done to make sure when we would start tourism, it would become quite favorable to tour operators to organize trips and travel to Egypt. Also, financial support by reduction of taxes, by waiving of municipal taxes and municipal charges for establishments, credit facilities, guarantees, rescheduling of deferral plans for utilities and municipals were also ensured for the establishments. All of those were kept also while ensuring that staff was not staff security and job security was not jeopardized. Measures of health and safety certificates were done. Gradual resumption also for the travel, inbound travel was put in place. Precautionary measures, and all of these measures were not done in silos. We were consulting with all the international firms, UNWTO, WHO, WTTC, all the international firms who are working in the tourism and aviation sectors were consulted when we were putting our measures for restarting tourism. Launching our regulations at that time and getting safe travels to the destination and to each and every hotel and restaurant establishment. These precautionary measures were kept and supervised by the ministry. Also, we've created a unique stamp that was given to all establishments, which we call it the health and safety stamp. That is inspired by the hieroglyphic language, showing life, prosperity, and health. And this was our wish to every traveler who was coming to Egypt. Again, various precautionary measures, and I'm quite keen to show here the procedures that we've done, tackling each and every element in each and every hotel, whether for the pool regulations, for the entrance, for the staying in the rooms, even for laundry services, even for the diving centers. Each and every spot that the traveler will be interacted with, the regulations for it was kept, was studied, was implemented. And the beautiful thing that our staff were even quite keen about ensuring that these regulations were followed and were implemented correctly. Also, a hotline was introduced to receive any comments or complaints from staff if their jobs were jeopardized. And then this call center was transformed to receive the comments and suggestions from travelers. It's now operating in 5 languages. And as we move more into more tourists would arrive to Egypt, we will introduce other languages as well. So we didn't start from we started with 25% occupancy in the hotel establishments. Then in June 2020, we moved to 50%. And back in 4th of July, we moved into 70% occupancy at the hotels. Also another important element to support tourism, that all staff working in the tourism sector, especially in the Red Sea and South Sinai, were 100% fully vaccinated. And to just shed on this, in a country with a population of 100 million citizens, vaccinating and giving a priority to staff who are working in the tourism sector to be vaccinated, this shows how much tourism is quite important to this country. Reopening the tourism sector, and this is exactly the backdrop I have with His Excellency Dr. Khaled Al-Anani welcoming the UNWTO Secretary General, who came to Egypt in August 2020, ensuring that the health and safety measures were kept. We were one of the first countries opening tourism, and for that, this was quite good recognition for our efforts ensuring the health and safety of travelers coming. Another dimension that we're working in the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities is the sustainable and responsible tourism, whereby hotel establishments and diving centers are given certificate for Green Star and Green Fins activities, whereby keeping guard of the environment is quite important. We want to keep our resources to the next generations, and for that we've introduced these certificates, whereby hotels and diving centers following certain and strict regulations for eco-environmental activities is introduced to them. And this is for to protect our underwater, colorful and beautiful beaches. Also, another initiatives for Sharm el-Sheikh, whereby introducing transformation projects in relation with the Ministry of Environment to protect our beaches there. Number of initiatives were introduced as well for the city. Egypt is building, imagine, Egypt is building number of new cities, and those I would call the new destinations for travelers to come and enjoy and really see how we're building these destinations from the capital, the new administrative capital. If you it's about 170 acres of space. This equals to Singapore. That is going to be habitant by about 6.5 million citizens, and this is equal to Norway. So it's not a city by itself. It's equals to other countries, and the government is moving the administrative operations from Cairo to the new capital. It is not that we're moving offices, and it's the vision of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi that is coming into life and quite soon. It's not that we're moving stuff, we're building a new country. We're building a new concepts in managing the government and administration operation. Another city that is being built also by the Mediterranean Sea is Al Alamein. Also, it's going to be another hub at the Mediterranean. Another city that is also being built by the Red Sea is Al Galala. And you can imagine that there is a new railroad that is going to link the three cities from Red Sea to the Mediterranean across the new capital for about 450 kilometers. Will take about 4 hours. You can move from Red Sea to the Mediterranean. This is something that we're all proud of and we're all waiting for, and I would invite you to come and experience, inshallah. This is the new Al Alamein city. It's another magnificent project that is taking place by the Mediterranean. Digital transformation. The number of projects that we're introducing now and we're bringing to the platform of the tourism industry in Egypt with as you know, that Umrah is quite important religious activity for Egyptians, and it was quite important for us to make sure that all Umrah travelers are experiencing this holy Sha'ira. I can't get the name, but in a safe and also they are not subject to any monopoly while they are doing this. So the new Egyptian Umrah portal has been introduced. New websites combining between both ministries, either the Ministry of Tourism or the Ministry of Antiquities, is being built. Managing portals between both ministries is being finalized. Also, it was quite important for us to know how many staff are working in this industry. And because tourism is a seasonal industry, we wanted to know how many staff. Initially, we have also almost about 1 million direct staff working in this industry, with about 10 million indirect employment. So another portal for the labor market is being done, just in case, because we wanted to know the number of staff working in this industry to be able to give them support whenever it's needed. Haya Karima is an initiative introduced by His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. It was not mentioned for, or it was not meant for tourism. However, at the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities also, we wanted to take part in this initiative by introducing number of villages that is going to be included in this initiative. Areas like in Fayoum, where there is a village specialized in pottery, and if you can Imagine transforming all the villagers to be working in handicrafts and pottery activity, and it's becoming now a destination for tourists. Also areas like Isna, where handicrafts and cuisine, special cuisine from from Upper Egypt is being also introduced in this lovely city of Isna. These projects, the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities is taking it in its focus to include the tourism activity within these rural villages. A taste of Egyptian gastronomy is a must. When you're coming to Egypt, you can't really miss eating falafel, eating kushari, eating molokhia. This is also part of the local gastronomy initiative that we are introducing, and I would encourage each and every traveler to come and try the Egyptian cuisine. Holy Family Pass, Egypt is unique with this exclusive trip where the Holy Family came through Egypt and they spent about 3 years and a half crossing over than 3,500 kilometers where Virgin Mary and Jesus the Christ came to Egypt for rescue. This path is going through 25 points, and it's been recognized by the Egyptian Church and also by the Vatican as one of the Christian pilgrims trips. Also, the Ministry of Tourism is looking at the enhancement of these points and introducing a new activity and a new travel experience for pilgrims and Christians. Openings and of special projects. Despite the pandemic, we were able to open a number of museums, the Museum of the Egyptian Civilization, talking about how Egyptian culture and living was developing across the years, with a mummy that is dated over than 3 million years until today. We have Ghada Museum, we have Sharm el-Sheikh Museum, so travelers who are going to the beach can now have a glimpse of archaeology and history activity. Also masterpieces of these magnificent artifacts. The gym, it's with its unique artifacts that is going to have. All the Tutankhamun pieces will be exhibited for the first time together under the gym. And it's one of the main things for it and the unique thing for it, although it could be not the biggest museum in the world, but it's the biggest museum featuring one civilization of its own. This is the Grand Egyptian Museum. Stay tuned for its opening. Hopefully, once the pandemic is over, it requires an equal opening and equal celebration for its, while Egypt is presenting this gem to the world. The Royal Carriages Museum is one of the openings that we had during the pandemic in 2020, despite the closure of all activities. Also, it could be visited in Cairo. Development of touristic services provided for visitors in the touristic areas, and like the place I'm in here today, overlooking the pyramids, this is a newly placed that is opened, and we're introducing new visitors' experiences in the various attractions. Yachting is another initiative that we're launching, whereby Egypt is building a new strategy for receiving yachting tourism to its ports. Enhancing Egypt tourism competitiveness. How can we position Egypt and change the perceptions in order to enhance the number of tourism arrivals? Actually, His Excellency Dr. Khalid Al-Anani has been very active despite the pandemic as well, attending international conferences, meeting with various ministers of tourism to restart inbound tourism to Egypt. And for that, we were able to open tourism with various countries. We wanted to showcase how we're doing, how we're applying the procedures to the world. And for that, we've introduced a number of promotional videos talking about the tourist journey in Egypt, because when the pandemic started, everyone were quite hesitant how the experience would be. I'll leave you with this.
Tactical and otherwise, addressed these misconceptions. I think that this would be an excellent opportunity for you to erase some of the false stereotypes about your country. The floor is yours, Madam.
One of the most misconceptions that were taken against tourism to Egypt is the number of infection rates in the country. And while we were resuming tourism to Egypt, we understood our strengths. We knew how we're going to restart tourism. And as I've mentioned before, that health and safety of travelers as well as our staff were the main concern for the government and for the Ministry of Tourism. So when we started tourism to the main areas of South Sinai in Sharm el-Sheikh and to Hurghada, we were quite aware of the number of infections in these areas. And based on that, and based on the very few number of infection rates in these areas, tourism restarted in there. Also, we didn't leave it like that. So we've ensured that negative PCR should be presented when we thought it was the right time to introduce that. This was one of the main concepts that we wanted to put in place while we were addressing our promotional and our promotional activities to countries to restart tourism with them.
Thank you, Madam. Another question is, given that Egypt is probably the one country in the world that's more integrated into the global tourism and leisure and antiquities network worldwide, it can be perhaps overwhelming or intimidating or confusing to the first-time non-visitor to Egypt. Where does she or he go most directly? Is there an online website that you recommend more than others? Those with pencil and paper or good memory could commit it to memory to facilitate the ease with which they can access so much of what you're sharing. And
well, for the moment, I can't really commit to a single website that the traveler should go through. However, going through reliable and reputable travel agents
yes,
could be the best way to experience Egypt. the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquity uh, uh, is standing to as a reference towards if any information needed towards verifying these reputable travel agents. They are registered on our books, as you've mentioned, and and it's going to be announced through our website as well. However, this would be the best traveler experience that could be done for a period of time. Also, again, the country is open for individual travelers. However, going through reputable travel agents could be the best experience that I could recommend.
Yes, Madam Vice Minister, the National Council on U.S. Arab Relations has focused before on bringing museum directors, deputy directors from various prominent, medium, smaller sized museums in the United States to Tunisia. And as a result of that, one of the museums, Denver, Colorado, the capital of Colorado, came back and worked to have a 6-month exhibition on Tunisia, its culture and artifacts, that this would not have happened otherwise. To what extent is there a strategic approach to recruiting, organizing, escorting, transporting American museum directors? Thousands of museums in the United States, but perhaps only in the dozens have their directors come to Egypt on an organized familiarization, visitation program. What strategies or experience or history do you have in this regard? That seems like a ready atmosphere, receptive, in the moment propitious to recruit these kinds of people who would benefit at both ends of the relationship, the American and the Egyptian.
Well, for the currently, our museums are being run by Egyptians, and the two newly opened museums, or the Museum of Civilization and the one for the gym, those are independent entities with that is reporting to the Ministry of Tourism. However, it's being run as an independent organizations. Recruiting or communication or even bilateral agreements with the reputable museums is something that we are currently doing and exchanging with multilateral and bilateral agreements with number of museums worldwide. The number of also there are exhibitions for the Egyptian artifacts that is touring the world, and this is another opportunity where we could exchange information and knowledge. Currently, a new exhibition is going to take place in Houston next month, so stay tuned for that as well. And all of these are our voices outside to promote the country and to promote also our culture and heritage.
Yes, thank you. And Madam Vice Minister, what are some of the more recent archaeological discoveries? Every year or two or three, there's front page and notice of this new thing being uncovered, discovered by archaeologists. And this makes it all the more thrilling and exciting because no other Arab, Middle Eastern, or Islamic country has the abundance and diversity of historical cultural monuments of significance as Egypt. What are some of the more recent ones that perhaps are not as well known as, of course, the Sphinx and the pyramids? And
yeah, next to Saqqara pyramids. Yeah, well, usually the discoveries are being announced on its time, and I can't really reveal this now. However, it will be announced in due course. However, I may tell you that we are planning for a magnificent parade that is equal to the Royal Mummies Parade that took place last April. And this is between the temple of Karnak and temple of Luxor. Its length is about 2.5 kilometers. And this parade, again, I promise you of a magnificent event that is going to take place quite soon, maybe between October or November. So stay tuned on that.
Good. And you've taken these extraordinarily impressive precautions to allay or assuage outsiders' inhibitions about going to any country other than their own, while the coronavirus 19 is still in sway. What have been the results so far, even if it's just anecdotal, between the measures that you've taken, prominent as they are and have been, and the results of the natija, of those policies and strategies so far? Usually there is a lag time after a country or a government introduces something new that changes ideas or policies or positions or actions or attitudes that people have fixed in their minds. So you've done that, you're doing that. Can you see or share any results so far, either in terms of the increase in numbers of tourists, inbound tourists, or the contribution of tourism since you've introduced these measures to the country's national economy, or lessening unemployment? What have been the consequences so far? I know it's an ongoing strategy and approach, and maybe it's too early, but can you share any of the results thus far?
But I might have burdened you with the precautionary measures that we've been taking throughout the past 18 months. But it's quite important that we would stress on that, because this is going to be our new norms. Coronavirus, I don't think it's going anywhere. It comes from, first wave, and until now we are expecting the fourth wave. We respect the regulations of each country towards opening tourism or receiving travelers to its lands. However, we are doing all our efforts to ensure and assure travelers and countries, management of countries, of the safety precautions, and that the one key element that I'm proudly can say that these procedures that we've put in place have ensured that we have not, since we've opened tourism in 1st of July 2020, we have not closed down again. And fingers crossed, and because of what we've done, we were not vulnerable to closing down tourism. This is one thing. The other thing is that the positive feedback from travelers when they come. And this is quite crucial, because nothing equals the positive feedback from travelers. The positive experiences when you're coming and sharing your video, I've met travelers myself, and they were saying, we come here and we forget about coronavirus. There isn't any coronavirus here, with the sea, sun, and sand. And this is all what people are looking for nowadays. The open space, the dry weather, the open environments. And these are the main elements that Egypt has presented to its travelers. These are the things that I'd like to really bring to the table today, and to assure that whenever we think that could be any risk. And another thing is the role of the Ministry of Tourism. By applying the strict procedures, we don't take it any lightly. If there is an establishment that is risking our intakes and our position, we don't take it any lightly. We just close down the operation of the property, and we assure that measures are kept and for the health and safety of staff and travelers as well. These are the assurances that are being given by the ministry and by the government as well.
Yes.
Your Excellency, Dr. Anthony, we've been getting this question from so many people. There must be at least 10 people, Dr. Anthony, that have emailed me. What are the COVID requirements that tourists should prepare for when planning to visit Egypt at the moment?
Well, for the moment, we are accepting people with negative PCR. We are accepting people who has been who are fully vaccinated by an internationally recognized vaccine. And the QR code has to be reflected on the certificates. I know that this has been an issue for travelers coming from US. However, we took the measures to study all the authorized certificates from the US, and now they are being implemented at the airports. And travelers with authorized vaccination forms are welcome at our airports. Also, traveling to the airports of Ghada, Sharm el-Sheikh can get PCR, can be PCR tested upon arrival. If even they can't present their a negative PCR document, they will be tested upon arrival. So these are the main requirements that travelers should be aware of before taking the flight and welcoming them to Egypt.
Your Excellency, you mentioned in one of your PowerPoint slides yacht tourism, which is something quite new and innovative. Is this mainly or exclusively for the Red Sea environs, or the Nile River as well? The Nile River cruises are famous, more than a century of history of having these. I took one with my wife and children before, and I'll never forget it. So how has that segment of Egypt's tourism industry been?
Well, we're quite new in that. I'm assuring you that we are not currently currently, we are not getting our fair share of this line of business. And with the beautiful weather of Egypt all year round, yachting and sea cruises is a newly activity that is being addressed throughout our ports. As I've mentioned, we have two seas at the Red Sea or Mediterranean, and both are equipped now with international marines. And now currently we are building relationships with different ports and building a platform also for regulations and fees for yachting, which will improve and enhance this type of touristic activity.
Madam Vice Minister, the governments probably of France and Italy, maybe Spain as well, will not appreciate the remark I'm about to make. But Egypt's future with regard to sun, sea, and sand is much brighter than that of the Italian, French, or Spanish Riviera. I've been on both sides of the Mediterranean, and on the Italian, French, and Spanish side, Costa del Sol and the Riviera, Côte d'Azur, the sun begins to disappear around 3:30 or 4. And not really disappearing, it's because the mountains block the continuation of the rays of the sun. Whereas in Egypt, you have it until 9:30 or 10 at night. The sun screams across the waters of the Mediterranean, and there's no comparison between the two. If that is a person's destination or interest, to be in warm climes with beautiful waters and sun, sea, and sand, there's no way that in the long run, France, Italy, Spain can compete with Egypt on the beaches, especially in the Mediterranean, possibly also in the Red Sea. Would you comment?
Yeah. Well, and also to comment on this, because our peak season is the winter season, where the whole of Europe is suffering from the cold weather, and Egypt is presenting its beautiful beaches and the warmth of sun and crystal clear water. So again, I hope, and this is our objective that we're all collaboratively working with, is that Egypt would become the next destination for all yachting and those fans of yachting to come and park even in Egypt when it's quite the weather is not that accommodating in the northern parts of the Mediterranean. Also, the Red Sea is becoming a destination, and as I've mentioned, El Galila city at the Red Sea, equipped also with a special marine for yachting, and it's going to be open quite soon. I believe it's going to reposition Egypt in this line of business.
Thank you. And Mr. Mancino, if you have additional questions, floor is yours.
Dr. Anthony, thank you very much. Your Excellency, we're in the United States. I know that people may have been reluctant. You've taken so many preventive measures to ensure safety of both Egyptians and tourists that are coming to your country. What would we need to know about departing from the U.S. in terms of arriving at customs, clearing customs, touring the country? Is there any special advice that you as minister would convey to people?
So coming to Egypt has not been as easy as it's now compared to other countries. Yet it's not without being lenient on procedures. We've introduced online visa portal, whereby travelers can apply for their visa and can take it within 24 hours. Entry touristic visa is $25, quite affordable. Number of airports are welcoming flights either from the major European airports directly, or for US on Egypt Air or other European countries. That's it. This is all what I can advise you with. Carrying your PCR and your vaccination certificate, your map, and perhaps a contact of your tour guide to explain to you the history and culture would give you the best experience when you're coming to Egypt.
Your Excellency, before we conclude with some concluding remarks from Dr. Anthony, behind you, for everyone who's been watching, is an extraordinary montage of pyramids. Could you explain, Your Excellency, where you are and the significance of those beautiful pyramids that are behind you?
Well, I'm at the Giza Plateau, overlooking more than 9 pyramids, and I couldn't really find a better, unique place to exhibit my country and to show it to you and really flourish your ambition to come and visit. It's just wonderful. It's a beautiful place, and I would This is all what I can. This is my gift to you and my invitation to you to come and experience
Thank
it
you.
yourself.
Thank you. Dr. Anthony, the concluding remarks, the floor is yours.
Well, I'll just re-summarize what makes Egypt so distinct and unique among nations with regard to the richness and value of its tourism offerings. And I mentioned two extraordinary fabled cities, Cairo, of the victorious, and Alexandria, which had the world's most famous museum in antiquity, which has now been reinstituted for some years on the site of the original museum in Alexandria, but also the richness of the country's agriculture. Perhaps no country has as well developed a system of irrigation with the richness of the silt and the other nutrients that come with the annual flow, perennial flow of the Nile Valley that spread out into the delta between Cairo and Alexandria all the way to the Mediterranean. And then in Cairo itself, I mentioned the Sphinx, we've mentioned the pyramids, but one of the most famous, if not the most famous, of all of the bazaars and markets in the Arab region, the Middle East, the Islamic world, in terms of Khan Khalili Bazaar. Every time I've been in Egypt, and I've lived there, it's 1963, 1965, 1968, 1969, and 1970. And my wife remains the Washington office director of the American University in Cairo. So this has occasioned both of us opportunities to visit Egypt. Even in our many visits to Egypt, we've not visited more than half of its museums. I listed about 6 or 7 world-class museums. Many countries among the 22 members of the League of Arab States, 28 Middle Eastern countries, 57 members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They might have as many as 3 national museums, world-class. Egypt has 7 or 8, with yet another one to come once the COVID-19 subsides. And we're talking about gender tourism as well. The queens of Egypt have shown the roles of women as national leaders since almost time immemorial. There in the Valley of the Queens and the Valley of the Kings and the tomb of Tutankhamun and many another tomb that has been discovered and unearthed. And we've talked about the Red Sea aspect, which is a more recent zone, geographic and otherwise, for Egypt's tourism industry, for, as Her Excellency mentioned, for snorkeling, for swimming, or simply just soaking up the rays by sun-starved individuals from Western Europe, Eastern Europe, elsewhere in the northern climes of the planet. The League of Arab States, pivotal role. When the United Nations was established in 1945, there was only one international regional organization up and running. The United States, as many people are aware, or they're not aware, did not join the League of Nations. And I'm one among others who believes that had we been a member, a proactive member, the opportunities for us to have avoided World War II would have been limited only by the imagination. But Egypt had the League of Arab States from the protocols of Alexandria in September 1944, opening its doors in February of 1945, remains the oldest regional organization from which the world can learn a great deal on how, for almost 24 countries, addressing region-wide and intra-regional issues and challenges for modernization and development, not through war, intimidation, attack, and conflict, but rather through the vehicles of diplomacy and peace and legality. So these are just a few of the main reasons. And for those who have children or of age and want to brush up on their Arabic or even be introduced to Arabic, there is the world-class Center for Arab Study Abroad, based at the American University in Cairo. I'm an alumnus of that program. These are just a few of the takeaways that one can benefit from, arguably, from Her Excellency's presentation and her focus on what the Egyptian government is doing systematically, legally, institutionally, operationally, to make it safe and secure for travelers who might otherwise have apprehensions, as they would understandably go into any country other than their own, if they've not been there before and they're uncertain of the rules and the regulations. And here, Her Excellency pointed out that in the 1860s, Egypt began to have an institutionalized approach to welcoming visitors and residents on a permanent basis or transient, temporary basis. So it's no newcomer to this industry. And it is the jewel amongst travel agents of worldwide tourism, and has been so for 2 centuries and counting.
Dr. Anthony, before you conclude, I've just been informed by Her Excellency's office that they have a video that they would like to play before Her Excellency departs. So with that, can we turn to Her Excellency?
Well, I'd like to really thank you for giving us the opportunity to showcase how Egypt combats and the resilience of this industry to resume inbound tourism. Also, I'd like to express my invitation to your council, to yourself, Dr. Anthony, and to your team to come and experience Egypt nowadays. And I would leave you with a magnificent short video just to, get you teased up to come and visit us soon.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for that beautiful video that was well produced and well received. We'd like to again thank our audience for your participation. and remind everybody that this video and audio will be available online at the National Council on U.S. Arab Relations website, along with Her Excellency's wonderful PowerPoint presentation. We thank you again. Have a wonderful afternoon and evening. Thank you. Good night.